The Yobai Oni, a Japanese horror story. The voice at the water's edge. There are sounds that live inside you forever. Your mother's voice calling you home for dinner. Your father's laugh. The particular way someone who loved you said your name, not just the word but the weight of it, the warmth, the specific music of being known completely by another person. Chiharu had not heard her mother's voice in 4 months. Not since the accident on the Tomei Expressway on a Tuesday evening in January, when a truck drifted lanes in the rain and her parents' small car had no chance at all. The police had been very kind. The hospital had been very efficient. The funeral had been very quiet. Chiharu was 20 years old and suddenly alone in the world in a way she had never imagined possible. She finished her teaching certification exams on autopilot, sitting in the examination hall, filling in answers, her body present and her mind somewhere else entirely. When her results came back and she had passed, she felt nothing except a vague surprise that the world had continued turning. Her only remaining family was her uncle Kizo, her mother's older brother, a quiet, deliberate man who had lived his whole life in the small rural village of Mizuhara in Akita Prefecture, far in the north, where the summers were short and the winters were the kind that reshape a person's relationship with cold. He had called her the week after the funeral and said simply, "Come and stay, as long as you need." She had taken the train north in the first week of May. The platform at Mizuhara Station was nearly empty when she arrived at 4 in the afternoon. Uncle Kizo was waiting at the gate. He looked older than she remembered. When he saw her, he smiled, a small, careful smile, and placed his hand on top of her head the way he had done when she was a child. He picked up her bag without asking and walked toward his car. They drove in comfortable silence through the countryside. Rice paddies stretched on either side of the road, the water in them reflecting the pale sky. Old farmhouses, unpaved lanes, a village shrine half hidden in cedar trees. Everything was exactly as she remembered from childhood visits, except one thing. The streets were empty, not just quiet, empty. No children on bicycles, no old women chatting outside shops, no farmers walking home from their fields. For 5 in the evening on a warm May day, the village felt abandoned, as though everyone had been called inside by some signal she hadn't heard. "Where is everyone?" she asked. Uncle Kizo's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. He said something about the season being busy. He changed the subject. Chiharu filed the question away and looked out the window. The Kizo family home was a large traditional farmhouse on the edge of the village, solid and dark timbered, surrounded by old camphor trees whose roots had cracked the stone path leading to the front door. From the second-floor window of her room, Chiharu could see the village pond through the trees, a wide, dark mirror of water that she had spent hours beside as a child, catching fireflies in summer, watching the surface freeze in winter. She ate a quiet dinner and went to bed early, exhausted from travel and from the weight she had been carrying since January. She fell asleep immediately. She woke at 2 in the morning. Her blanket had slipped to the floor. She leaned down to pick it up and heard it. From outside her window, from the darkness, "Chiharu." One word, her name. Her heart lurched upward into her throat. For one single moment, before the rational part of her mind could intervene, she felt pure, uncomplicated joy, because the voice was her mother's voice, exact and unmistakable, the particular warmth of it, the specific way her mother had always said her name, as though the word itself were a small gift. Then the joy collapsed. Her mother was dead. Her mother had been dead for 4 months. Her mother's voice could not be coming from the darkness outside an old farmhouse in Akita Prefecture. Chiharu sat very still on the edge of her bed and listened hard. The night was completely silent. Whatever she had heard, or thought she had heard, was gone. A dream, she told herself. The edge of a dream, bleeding into waking. She lay back down. She did not sleep again until dawn. The next several nights were quiet, but something in the house sat wrong with her, a low, persistent unease she couldn't locate or name. She slept badly. She lay awake listening to sounds she couldn't identify. She found herself waiting for something without being able to say what she was waiting for. Every night before she closed her eyes, she thought, "Tonight I might hear it again." She both hoped and feared that she would. One night, unable to sleep, she took her mother's old furoshiki wrapping cloth, the soft indigo cotton one that she had brought with her from Tokyo, which still held the faintest trace of her mother's scent, and wrapped it around her shoulders. She climbed the stairs to the rooftop terrace that Uncle Keizo used for drying vegetables in autumn. The night was very clear. The camphor trees were still. Through the gaps in the branches, she could see the village pond shining black and silver in the moonlight, perfectly motionless, perfectly calm. She sat on the old wooden bench and looked at the water. The single bare bulb on the terrace flickered and went out. Old house, she thought. She turned on her phone torch, and then from the stairwell behind her, very close, in a voice she would have recognized in any darkness anywhere on earth, "Chiharu, come in, sweetheart. You'll catch cold out here." Every muscle in her body locked simultaneously. She could not move. She could not turn around. She sat rigid on the bench with her phone torch pointed at the floor, while the voice that was her mother's voice waited behind her. "Come to me, Chiharu. I've been calling you for so long." Closer now, right beside her ear, the breath of it warm against her neck. "I'm waiting for you. Come quickly." Something pulled the furoshiki from her shoulders with a sharp tug, as though a hand had grabbed one end and yanked. Chiharu turned. Nothing. The terrace was empty. The stairwell was dark and quiet. The night was exactly as it had been. Only the indigo cloth was gone, lying on the other side of the terrace railing, somehow outside it, draped over the edge, hanging down toward the ground 3 floors below. If she had stood up and walked toward the voice, she would have walked straight over the railing. She understood this with cold and absolute clarity. She went downstairs. She knocked on Uncle Keizo's door. She sat at his kitchen table under the fluorescent light while he made tea, and she told him everything. The first night, the rooftop, the voice, the cloth. Uncle Keizo listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he told her what he should have told her when she arrived. People had been disappearing from Mitsuhara. It had started in late winter. A farmer who went to check his irrigation channels one evening and never came home. Then a teenage boy who went to the convenience store at 9 p.m. Then an elderly woman who swore to her daughter she had heard her late husband calling from the garden. Their remains were found in pieces in the cedar forest behind the village, days or weeks later. At first, the police thought animal attacks, but the pattern was wrong. Too selective, too regular, too precisely timed to the hours after midnight. The village priest had a name for what was happening. Yobai Oni, the calling demon. An entity from the deep rural mythology of northern Japan, older than the shrines, older than the village itself. It was said to be genderless, formless, ancient beyond age. It had no face of its own. It borrowed the faces of the dead. It listened. It gathered the voices of those who had recently died and held them in its body like a collection, not to honor them, but to use them as bait, as lures, as hooks to draw the grieving toward it in the dark. It chose people who were raw with loss, people who had just been cracked open by grief, people who, if they heard the voice of someone they had lost, might, just for one moment, stop thinking and simply follow. It called your name in your loved one's voice. It led you toward water, toward heights, toward edges. It never touched you. It didn't need to. It just called and waited and let your own love carry you the rest of the way. Everyone in the village knew. Everyone had locked their doors and stopped going out after dark and told their children not to listen to voices in the night, no matter whose voice it sounded like. Uncle Keizo had meant to tell Chiharu. He had been trying to find the words. He had not found them quickly enough. He looked at his niece across the kitchen table and pressed his lips together. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have told you the moment you arrived." The next day, Chiharu could not settle. She walked through the farmhouse restlessly, moving from room to room. Uncle Keizo watched her with quiet concern and tried to keep her occupied, asking her to help with cooking, with sorting tools in the workshop. But her attention kept drifting. After lunch, while Uncle Kizo was napping, she slipped out of the house. She told herself she would only go as far as the pond, just for half an hour. She would be back before dark. She just needed to breathe open air. The pond path was quiet and beautiful in the afternoon light. The reeds at the water's edge made small sounds in the breeze. Dragonflies moved over the surface like living sparks. She sat down under an old willow tree at the water's edge, put in her earphones, and let the music fill her head. The warmth and the sound and the sleepless nights caught up with her simultaneously. She slept. When she opened her eyes, the sky was dark red at the horizon. The sun was almost gone. She pulled out her earphones and stood quickly, reaching for her bag. At the far edge of the pond, in the last light, a woman was crouching at the water's edge, washing something. Chiharu squinted across the water. Something about the figure stopped her. The angle of the shoulders, the particular stillness. She walked around the pond toward the woman, telling herself she was just going to say goodnight and head home. As she got closer, she saw what the woman was washing. The indigo furoshiki, her mother's cloth, the one that had been pulled from her shoulders on the rooftop terrace. The woman was washing the same section of it over and over. The same motion repeated, the same fold of cloth lifted and pressed against the stones and lifted again, in a loop that had no beginning and no end. Chiharu looked at the ground around the woman. No shadow. The last light of the sun was hitting everything around the woman, the stones, the water, the reeds, and casting long shadows eastward. The woman cast nothing. Chiharu took a quiet step backward. Chiharu! The woman's head turned toward her. She was wearing a black kimono with a pale gray obi. Her face was covered by her hair hanging forward. "You came." The voice was her mother's voice. Perfect. Complete. Not an imitation. The real thing. Every inflection exact. Every harmonic precisely right. The voice Chiharu had heard every day of her life for 20 years. Chiharu's feet stopped moving. The woman pushed her hair back from her face and looked up. The 1,000 times she had heard it and not thought to treasure it because she had believed, the way all young people believe, that it would always be there. She thought, my mother is gone. My mother is truly, permanently gone. And whatever has been calling my name in the dark is not her, and has never been her, and does not deserve one more second of my grief. Something settled in her chest. Not peace, not yet, but something steadier than what had been there before. The Yobai Oni called her name one more time that night, from the edge of the camphor trees, in her mother's voice. Chiharu heard it clearly through the closed window. She pulled her blanket up, pressed the cedar amulet to her heart, and closed her eyes. She did not go to the window. She did not answer. The following morning, Uncle Keizo found the indigo furoshiki folded neatly on the front doorstep. Chiharu picked it up and held it against her face for a long moment, breathing in the last trace of a scent that was already fading. Then she folded it carefully, put it in her bag, and went inside to help her uncle make breakfast. People in Mizuhara still lock their doors before dark. They still tell their children, if you hear a voice calling your name at night, even a voice you recognize, especially a voice you recognize, do not answer. Do not go to the window. Do not go outside. The Yobai Oni is still there. It is always still there. It has been there longer than the village, and it will be there long after. It is patient in the way that only truly ancient things are patient. It is waiting for someone who misses someone enough to hope, just for one moment, that death might not be permanent after all. It is counting on that hope. Don't give it one.